we found out in the delivery room. Despite the many scans that we had beforehand, there was nothing that showed up. So we found out in the delivery room, and it was quite a shock, obviously. We weren't expecting it. I suppose your first baby, you're excited and you've all the same wishes and hopes that everybody else does when they have a baby for the first time. And so to be given that kind of news just as the baby was born was, quite devastating at the time. I was very clueless about the whole thing. Had no personal experience and no up to date information at all. Like anything I knew about Down syndrome was you'd see an old couple shuffling along with their older child, and that was all I thought of. I didn't know anything about how times have changed, and thankfully that's not the future that most of these children have now. But at that time, when I was in the hospital, no, I had nothing, and that's all I thought of, to be honest, when it happened. There was very little support. We saw a social worker who was very young, I'd say in her 20s, and probably had even less personal experience of Down syndrome than I did. She was terribly nice, but in terms of information, nothing was really offered. She gave us a book that I'd say was written in the 60s or 70s and was quite off-putting, to be honest. And that was about it. There was kind of vague discussions about benefits and what we were entitled to, but at that stage, your head is spinning and you don't really know, you don't really take much of that in. What I personally wanted was up-to-date information. What could I expect from my child now? What I really wanted to hear from was other parents in a similar situation, in a recent similar situation. But again, there was no network, no link in with any charity or organisation specifically for Down syndrome. That was it. It was just some outdated comments and remarks from midwives in the hospital, and to be fair to them, they were just doing a different job, but unfortunately, I'm sure down to the current climate, they don't have recent training and up-to-date information or anything to offer, new parents. So it was woefully inadequate, really, when I think back, what was on offer. Absolutely, it would have benefited, yeah. To have one person that you could have asked all the questions to that were going around in our head would have been, so much more helpful and beneficial to us in those early days when you have so many questions and no answers, really. And, there's also health issues as well. And, although the hospital were, sort of dealing with that too, if you just had one point of contact, it would have made things so much easier, and I'm sure the nurse could have linked us in with other parents as well if that's what we wanted. And in those stages we didn't know what to expect, or we didn't know that thankfully Ava will probably go to mainstream school and live a relatively normal life these days, but and that's all you want to hear in those early stages when you're worried about your baby, and nobody could tell us that really on the ground. So to have a nurse there that was dedicated and that has all the answers would have been, amazing, really. So I feel kind of jealous of people now who have that. Well, not jealous is the wrong word, but I'm just delighted that it's happening and that people don't have to go through really what we went through. I suppose the very early days, you were just hearing anecdotes from people, which were helpful sometimes and other times not, because again, some of them would be very outdated. I suppose we try to go on the internet when we can, but that's not always advisable either, because that sometimes gives you worst case scenarios as well. To be honest with you, the most helpful comment I got was from somebody I knew through work, who was a mother to a child of Down syndrome, and though she wasn't a close friend, she'd heard about Ava being born and texted me to say that, you know, Ava would do everything that every other little child would do. It just might take her a bit longer. And that was the one comment that over the first 2 weeks when she was in ICU got me through, really, because once I knew that, I relaxed. And I think that's all anybody wants to hear. And yet nobody in the hospital could have told me that. And nobody, even the social worker, nobody knew that to even tell me. And that was the one thing I just wanted to relax about, because in my own ignorance of the condition, I didn't realise that she would do everything. You know, I really just didn't know enough about it. I didn't know whether she'd ever like ride a bike or do anything like that, and that was the only thing that was on my mind. And once I knew that, you know, I kind of relaxed. But it's a pity that I kind of had to find that out for myself, that, you know, there was nobody in a professional capacity offering me this kind of reassurance, I suppose, you know.